So we've got a new episode of Legends and Leaders. Today it's great to have Rachel here. Rachel, you have studied, analyzed, and given great insights all around fertility and what is required for just the best practices to be done for success. And there's like so many different areas. It's wild. Just from reading what you've been up to that you can really improve upon. And I'm excited to just talk about lots of different studies and analyzations that you've done in this area and stuff you've determined that can be most helpful to people, and jump into your journey and talk about it. So thanks for coming on.
Yes, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So Rachel, how did your interest in this area begin? I'm just kind of curious about your background, and your passion for this space. How did you get passionate about it?
Yeah, I think to be honest, if I just kind of rack my brain for how I initially came into the field of nutrition in the first place, I would probably attribute that to a class that I took in undergrad of college when I was
Yeah.
trying out a whole bunch of different majors, right? In terms of, is it bio, kinesiology, just so many things. I had no idea kind of the route that I was going. What changed everything was a physiology class that I took. So it's essentially like, how did I know that was the class that sparked everything? It's because it's the only class that like truly left me with a sense of awe about the human body. So it's like, it was remarkable. You're learning about, the electrical conduction of the heart and action potentials and, the generation of energy within the cells, which is the entire reason that you and me are talking right now, is the reason why we're alive. Like, this stuff is absolutely unbelievable. And if everything I said just kind of like, what went in one ear and right out the other, that's okay, because this is what I'm passionate about, right? And this is what left me with that sense of, disbelief. And so, look, just kind of being interested about the human body and physiology in general is it all kind of boils down to that moment in that class. From there, though, there's so many ways to kind of get into this profession, and typically it's going to be a medical doctor, right? But I knew that I didn't want to help people through, writing prescriptions and kind of that standard track. I wanted to have, help people heal themselves and bring their bodies back into homeostasis as best as possible through natural routes. And for me, that just meant, diet, lifestyle, all the things aside from prescriptions. And so really, I just spoke about, my passion, which is like that physiology class and the body and learning about that on a very deep level. And then I kind of married that with, my purpose on earth, which is really the desire to help people and empowering people to proactively manage their biology so they can live the most fulfilled life. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And then that kind of segued into this massive pain point that I was seeing in practice, which is fertility.
So the educational background, like, I mean, there's obviously traditional education you can get for this space, but it seems like you've done a lot of like self-study. Like, how does you kind of learn more about this category and then eventually come up with your own insights and, how-tos and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I have to say, it's kind of like, so a lot of the philosophy around this, it's always like, oh, us versus them, like F the system, like the medical system, conventional medicine is awful. And I see that actually as not correct. So in order to develop my thoughts and my perspective and my viewpoint now, like I actually had to go through that training. I had to go through the medical training in the hospital, right? The clinical rotation. So that was actually the foundation by which that I could build upon that. From there, you know the saying, kind of like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about that. That was my lived reality when I then joined a concierge medical practice outside of schooling, right? When I was done with schooling. And those physicians and the physicians that I still work with, they were so brilliant. I just remember thinking like, wow, this is going to make me level up so fast. And it did. I was like the first one in, last one out, right? Typical for the practice, like spending every waking hour looking into research, just figuring out things that I didn't know or that I heard about. I was like a giant sponge. So that was kind of the clinical experience. And then, fast forward a few years, I'm like, I keep want to, you know, I desire more. I want to level up the information. So I went back, did more functional medicine training for a few years. That really kind of informed my viewpoint as well. And that later led me to a crossroads kind of in my career about 3 years ago when I'd done all this extra training, done all this extra work, so on and so forth. And I was like, you know what? I could still do better. I could still do better for all the people that I'm seeing in practice. And again, this pain point of women coming to me in practice feeling extremely disempowered about themselves and their body and about the process that they were going through with fertility, that made me realize, like, look, I could either go back to school, pursue my PhD. I'd already had a master's at that point, or I could spend the equivalent time, doing research for this book and looking into thousands of studies and interviewing all the world's best experts on this subject, and sort of giving this vessel, right? Getting this
Hmm.
into a vessel that could disseminate to a larger population of people that, aren't necessarily in concierge medicine.
So you just touched on like an interesting point of like how you had women talking to you about this, and you felt like there needed to be a better resource. Were there specific experiences you had that like really pushed you over the top? Because like it's a commitment what you did. I mean, it's a pretty substantial commitment to build out. You've talked to tons of people, lots of leading experts. What pushed you over the top to actually do this? Was there some experience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just hate seeing it's like when you're looking to build a family, kind of just taking a step back, I would hope that you would be sort of the most confident in your life, right? About your body and about your ability to do things, right? And move forward in life. I mean, this is incredible. The fact that, people were so like presenting into office, right? I'm sitting across from them. They're like confused about the first thing to do. They're given very reactive advice from their doctors. They're like playing a game of whack-a-mole based off of their symptoms, right? About why things aren't going the way they should. Or they were presenting to me because it's like they were handed like one fits all dietary advice, right? Given like a one sheet or told to like follow the Mediterranean diet, which isn't bad, by the way. But you get what I'm saying. It's very, nebulous. And all that I'm referring to, Ben, like I call that kind of fertility 1.0.
Mhm.
It's not setting up women for success. It's not preventative and proactive in nature. It's not optimizing underlying physiology to improve chances of conceiving, right? That's what led me to the approach of like, look, I have to do something different. I have to empower women with a deeper understanding of their whole bodies. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, so what do you want people to take away most from the book? Like, there's lots of like fertility is a big category, Rachel. I mean, there's lots of different areas you can talk about infertility. Where does you hone in most, and how do you think it's going to help, people most, basically?
Yeah. So I wasn't about to write this book if it was going to be like the other books on the shelf, first and foremost, right? So the way I approached this was exactly what I do in practice, which is I looked at fertility through a first principles approach, just like you would maybe I mean, you're a founder, right? Looking at different businesses from that model. I just basically did the same thing for fertility. So, what does that look like for me? It looks like what are the root cause levers that are within our control that are capable of shifting how the entire body functions and how that optimizes, our chances of conceiving. That's all I did. However, I know I make it sound very simple. There was no other book or anything I could find online that actually truly took that comprehensive, holistic, root cause based approach, and that I could give to him. And so that's why I had to write it myself. But that's what I want people to take away, is that we aren't
Mhm.
looking at this through a siloed lens, right? This problem, if you will, or this goal in life. We aren't doing
Mhm.
that anymore. That's like, again, fertility 1.0. It's kind
Mhm.
of archaic in my mind.
I thought one of the interesting areas you focused on was the environmental changes that you can make that help get rid of toxins and don't bring these toxins into your environment. I mean, can you just talk a bit about like what can you even do? Like, what are some things that are maybe easy things to do that are much better for fertility?
Yeah, well, so we can anchor this concept really fast of like, why is it that you just brought this up? The reason is that there are unfortunately factors in our environment that I think of it as how can we, like, they look to, how can we unblock those sort of complications from occurring? How can we unblock our physiology? Whereas all these environmental chemicals, it's kind of like getting in the way of what our body is intelligently designed to do. So that's kind of what we're after here. So we have kind of the micro nanoplastics. That's one
Mhm.
component where you have, and like what even is that? That's kind of a, think of a physical particle, right? We have that component that's found in like every organ in our body now. Research has shown that. Then we have the chemical component that it might be complexed with, meaning some of those can be disruptive to our hormones. Those are called endocrine disrupting chemicals, right? So we have the physical component, the chemical component that can just get in the way of our body functioning its best, right? So, what can everyone do? Back to your question, as like really simple unblocks to reduce their collective exposure of the chemicals of these endocrine disruptors that can really help out. There are hundreds of things that you can do, Ben, but really the three top ones that will make the most difference, it comes down to food, water, and air. So I'll give you one
Mhm.
example of each category. With the air, most of the time we spend our time indoors, right? So it's kind of like that air is actually very polluted. We have all these sort of chemical components in the air because remember they're so small, like you can't see them, that we breathe in, and those can be harmful. One of the things that you can do if you're in the position to is put HEPA filters in your home, right? That's kind of the easiest way. It's a little bit more expensive. That's why you can also put in, do a little like air purifier in your room with the HEPA filter,
Mhm.
right? So again, just you can do anything based off of your budget, but the air is one thing that I would really look to optimize. In terms of the food, that's how I think about, the more ultra processed foods that you're eating, the more these chemicals accumulate along the food supply line. So the more whole foods that you can eat in their natural form, right? The less kind of like takeout where like all that stuff is sloughing off from those white styrofoam
Sure.
containers, those like pizza boxes, all of that, like that's getting into your food. The more that you can, consider cooking once or twice at home, like doing a little bit of meal prep or just reducing takeout, reducing ultra processed foods. That's going to be that's going to be a category crusher right there because that's very very significant. In terms of the water, which is the last kind of category, just as a tangible takeaway, one of the most effective things that you can do to reduce your cumulative exposure, right, the collective exposure, is to have a reverse osmosis filter at home, either like a countertop version or one that goes under your sink. That would be the gold standard for reducing some of these environmental toxicants.
And like, and you've seen that this is substantial, a kind of improvement from having a proper air filter.
This is what, so I look at it as this is, so the environmental category is just one bucket that we get to
Yeah.
optimize because it's in our power, it's in our control.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'll tell you something that's outside of our control, right, are like different anatomical differences, right? So it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter the environment, that you're exposed to. If you have something that you need to go in for medical attention because that's a fertility blocker, right? Like that's something we can't control. Something else we can't control is our age, for example. And
Mhm.
we know that our fertility just declines with age. It is what it is. So the environmental package, so to speak, is just one awesome lever point that everyone has in our control that we have the ability to optimize. And so looking at it through a siloed lens of like just doing this to the air or just doing this one thing, that's kind of a very narrow focused view. And I want people and I want that question to be more like zoomed out, like, okay, I'm thinking about all the little changes that I can make. Again, that's just the environmental bucket.
Mhm.
I put many other like buckets, so to speak, in the
Yeah.
in the book that you can leverage within your favor.
Okay. And so you've also done a lot of like just working with different people in all different categories and kind of optimizing them. Um, so you've dealt with Victoria's Secret models. I know there's been a lot of kind of talk around, just people that have to be in a certain form for their profession. It can take a toll on them. Have you seen stuff like that in some of these areas, whether it's with actors and shows in Netflix or models like that that they really have to recalibrate themselves for fertility?
Oh my gosh, Ben, I'm so happy you brought this up. Yes, all the time. That's literally like
Wow.
on a day-to-day basis. So, like I'll give you an example. Sometimes the profession that one chooses doesn't necessarily align with their life goal of, say, like building a family, for example. So
Yeah.
we have to figure out kind of that middle ground. Like, for example, if a woman is too low in body fat, right? Most of Americans, it's like too high in body fat, but
Yeah.
for this sense, for say a model, she might have too low of body fat to have regular ovulation. If you don't have regular ovulation, of course you can't get pregnant, right? There's no
Right.
egg to be fertilized. And so, you know, thinking through with every single person is so different. Like, how can we kind of marry these two goals, and what are the changes that we can make so that they can pursue this next goal in life, right? Which is building a family. But yes, this is kind of my day to day. I'm so happy you brought this up though and acknowledged it.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of stuff about it, but I'm curious, like the truth of it all. But it seems like some women really have to go through quite a process before they're even ready.
Yeah, absolutely. This book kind of is taking the approach. It's not just for people like that are having problems in this and that. I want people to look at, if they have the goal of one day building, one day having a family. Okay, great. What can we do to optimize the body for that goal? And to your point, and to the people that you just mentioned, that looks a little bit different, but like there are core tenets that we can all apply that's going to help make our physiology function better, and that's going to improve our chances of
Mhm.
conceiving.
Have you found, Rachel, that it's all this what we were talking about with Victoria's Secret models and maybe some actors who have to have a certain physical, kind of category that they're in, and they may have stuff that they have to work on. Has that actually translated over and similar with Fortune 500 female executives as well? Because they don't have to be in a certain physical sense. I'm sure they're working out, et cetera. But because of the stress and the stuff that happens in their job, is that something you've also really had to build out kind of personalized plans for those types of people?
Totally, the stress. And think about this. Like, actually, I'll give you a great example of this. I'm not going to tell one of my women who manages billions, of assets under her to be like, oh, you need to stress less, Sally. Or, it's kind of like I mean, just think about how that comes across. Like, they have done everything in their life to get to that position. And like, here I am going to tell them to like, you need to stress less. However, we definitely know that in terms of physiology, stress in the body is not going to be conducive to our goal in any way. So it's actually finding like making sure that I know that individual so well that every single recommendation that I provide them, it's going to be like hyper tailored. So it's going to resonate well. I'll give you the simplest example of what I mean. If someone is in kind of that fight or flight, right? That sort of sympathetic nervous system dominant state, that can definitely influence sort of the communication between our brain and our gonads, right? So ovaries for women, testes for men. If we want to try to unravel a little bit of that, for one woman, for example, I just think of like, what are little incision points that I can have her, look at throughout the day. For one woman, it was just a matter of like, hey, let's try to do like some deep breaths before eating, so we can kind of get the body out of a locked up state. I'm intentionally saying something that is so basic, because I don't want everyone to walk away with like, oh, there's so many strategies and tactics that are unattainable. Like, no, we know how to bring our body back into balance. That's just one kind of very simple example. But yeah, you need to think about like, what are ways that you can do better and improve. And it's my job to help people realize those opportunities that they have.
So I get it that there's this kind of like full picture. There's environment, there's mindset, there's oral health, there's lots of different areas. Um, would you say that it like skews more towards one area? Like, because if you don't have the right mindset kind of system in place and mentality for it, I guess everything doesn't work. Is there kind of, does it skew to different areas of these categories that you're in that some are more important than others?
So actually, almost the exact opposite. So what you fundamentally understood just by asking that question is this concept of a systems biology based approach, right? Where it's kind of like, you could be killing it in one area, like and doing great work. But if your mindset and your emotional health is like in the garbage and it is terrible, I mean, think about just how you pursue your life in general, right? And so we have to kind of level up certain ones. And yes, for some people, that's going to mean like, hey, John here needs to work on his metabolic health. Like Sally, we need to work on like her sympathetic health because she's already like dominating the nutrition front. So we can look at all of these factors. But yes, actually, again, I know you understood that like intuitively by asking that question.
So, Rachel, what's your biggest focus now? Besides the book, let's just say the next 5 to 10 years, what does it look like for you? I mean, you've got a great practice, you're helping a lot of people. And what more do you want to do?
All that really I can focus on in terms of like the long-term goal and vision. Yeah, the book just came out. Now I need to actually, get it into the hands of people and empower both the public and the physicians. But yeah, when I'm thinking about long term, I'm just thinking of, expanding. How can I expand my work into the public that's beyond fertility, where areas of conventional medicine are falling short, or we're doing people a disservice with the information out there. And guess what? Luckily for me, there's a whole lot of those areas. And so that's what I wake up excited about every single day. And so ultimately, like the book that I wrote is just one vehicle for kind of that greater mission, right? Empowering people to proactively manage their biology so they can live the most fulfilled life. And I'm tackling fertility, but you bet I'm about to tackle other areas as well.
That's exciting. Well, Rachel, thanks for taking the time and doing this. I think it's great what you've written here and how you have this, just this comprehensive picture for people to just have a better experience with fertility. And I think that there needs to be more of a guide. So this is really great that you've kind of broken it down and also made it more step-based, like kind of step-based, where it's like some easier steps, some more harder steps, like you were discussing here as well. I think it's good not to overwhelm people. So they should definitely check out your book. And I'm excited to see what will come next from you and what the future holds. Thanks for doing this.
Ben, thank you so much. It's I love sharing my passion. So thank you for letting me share it on your platform as well. And with you, I really appreciate it.